My entire life I've been kind of a people pleaser. And I'm not exactly sure why, but I just have a really hard time saying no. I've sort of been like this my entire life. Like, I remember when I was younger and my parents were getting a divorce, it seemed like I had to pick a side. It seemed like whenever I was around one parent or the other, I had to like kind of talk bad about the parent that wasn't around to them, or they would talk bad and ask my opinion, and it felt like I would always have to just try to mediate and try to just keep everyone happy and try to play the middle road. I'd always, agree with them and then agree with the other one, and then I don't know. And I've always had a hard time saying no my entire life. Like, even things that realistically I shouldn't have said yes to, things that interfered with my scheduling, because I just never wanted anyone to be unhappy. I never wanted anyone to, be at a disadvantage in anything because of me. Even if it was something crazy where a friend calls me in the middle of the night and asks if they can crash in my place that night. Like, even if it was completely inconvenient with my scheduling and would get me in trouble with my parents and would cause all these problems in my life, I've always just gone out of my way to make sure I never say no or make sure I never put anyone in that position. And obviously, you should be attentive to others and you should be willing to go out of your way and sometimes even put yourself in uncomfortable positions for those you care about. But there's a point where being too much of a people pleaser, it's like you are putting everyone else first to your own detriment at times. Like sometimes you need to be able to say no. Sometimes it's necessary to hold down your firm boundaries and say like, no, this is not something I'm comfortable with. Like, if it was anything else, like if there's some other arrangement we could come to, but in terms of this specific thing you're asking of me, I'm not going to be able to do this. Sometimes you need to be able to do that because, you know, you're a people pleaser because you care about others' perception of you in some way, or you don't want them to be unhappy, or you don't want them to be negatively affected in any way by you. What you don't realize is them putting you in that uncomfortable position, like, they are not giving you the same respect that you were giving them by considering it in that same way. Because if they were a people pleaser like you, if they had the same mindset as you, then if you told them no, they would perfectly understand that. Like, whenever I've ever asked someone for something, or I've, like, needed to put someone in that situation and they've said no, I've been perfectly comfortable with that because I don't like conflict. I don't like to cause problems. But it seems like the times in my life where I have said no, it's always like people have reacted very negatively, even when I had very legitimate reasons why I couldn't. Like, I had a friend where he wanted to have a sleepover one night. Even something as simple as that. Like, he really wanted to hang out with me that night, and I said, like, no, I can't. Like, I have all this stuff to do. And he got kind of like, I don't know if I would say pissed at me, but he was just like upset because it was an inconvenience to him because he wanted to hang out that night and he didn't care that it wasn't in my schedule, and he reacted negatively. But if I was ever on the other side of that, like if I asked someone to hang out and they said they couldn't for valid reasons, I would never react that same way. And so the reality is that, like, you giving people the same benefit of the doubt that you expect them to give you is not always the case. Like, although we want to live by the golden rule and say, like, yes, do unto others as you would want to have done unto yourself or whatever, the reality is that not everyone's going to follow that principle to the T. And so, in this world, sometimes you sort of have to look out for yourself. You have to have some amount of, like, boundaries. You can't let people just walk all over you or expect things of you. And sometimes, however rarely this is for you in your circumstances, you need to be able to put your foot down, draw a line, and say, like, look, man, like, not this time, this isn't for me. It's like, it takes a level of assertiveness to get ahead in life. It takes a level of being able to be your own advocate and stand up for yourself because everyone else is doing that. And the reality is that no one else is going to stand up for you and be an advocate on your behalf in those situations, at least not very likely. And so you need to learn to be able to stand up for yourself and be able to say no when it really matters. And part of that is having a good self relationship. Like, I was a big people pleaser because I relied so much on these relationships I had, and so much of that was like an internal desire to maintain these relationships. Like, I didn't want anyone to be unhappy with me or to have negative feelings towards me. So I've always gone so far out of my way. Like, even if I'm in a bad mood, no matter what's going on, I've like worked incredibly hard to like maintain positive emotions with these people all the time. Like, no matter how impatient I'm getting or how unmotivated to do something I am, like, I always just with a smile on my face just show up and try to be the best version of myself because I want to maintain that relationship. It's like I feel like I have to be, perfect all the time to maintain some of my relationships, whereas some of my friends and things, they can just be grumpy and treat me badly some days, and it seems like I don't hold them accountable to that, and they don't hold themselves accountable to that, but they'll hold me accountable if I'm not acting that way, or things like that. And so I feel like I need to maintain this specific atmosphere around me, like always trying to be like perfect in our relationship, always saying yes, always doing what's in their best interest to maintain it. But once I realized that like I have myself and I have this good solid foundation of my self relationship, and I need to have respect for myself and to have boundaries that I shouldn't let people cross, then suddenly I was comfortable saying no. And even if they did react badly in really like over the top, like ridiculous ways, like holding me to some like ridiculous standard, I would just say no and hold my ground. And a lot of the time, yeah, they would get upset with me. They'd be like, "What do you mean you're saying no, this and that?" But like with time, eventually, I feel like they just grew to respect that suddenly I have boundaries. Suddenly, like there are lines I'm not willing to let anyone cross, and I hold people to that. And I feel like people respect me more. They don't try to push me around. I don't feel like I have to say no as often because they're less likely to just throw all these demands on me out of nowhere because I was the person they always expected to say yes. It's like suddenly once you've grown that atmosphere around you of having self-respect, then less people are willing to take advantage of you, and then your relationships won't be hampered by that. Like, I think people instinctively know if you're a people pleaser, if you're the sort of person that they can take advantage of. And it's not always in like a malevolent way. Like humans, I feel like, we do a lot of things unconsciously, and people in your life, even really, really good people, might be taking advantage of you. Not because they don't love you, probably because they love you. In a lot of cases, they're taking advantage of you. And they might not realize they're doing it. It might not be malevolent or necessarily like negative or wrong. But the reality is that sometimes they will take advantage of you. Sometimes if they see an opportunity, even something simple, they'll be like, "Yo, like go fill up this glass of water for me," just because they don't want to stand up. And some amount of doing things for others is good, but if it feels like you are being selectively targeted for things like that, like if they're selectively trying to take advantage of that aspect of you because they know you're a people pleaser, that's when you need to realize that boundaries are important, because like I said, they don't necessarily even know they're doing it. They're not doing it to hurt you. It's just like they know that you're a people pleaser and that their lives will be somewhat easier if they take advantage of that quality. Like if they are stranded out in the desert somewhere and they could pay for an Uber to come get them, they'd rather save $20, they'll call you and wake you up or make you leave work or whatever to come get them. That's a really random example, but it's things like that where it's like a lot of the times when you say no and you don't give them you as an option, they'll find another option. Like there's very rare instances where only you can fill this hole for someone. It's just that you are the most obvious, easiest answer for them, so they always turn to you. But if you don't give them that option, if you have boundaries and say like, "Nah, man, that's not gonna work for me tonight," then they'll find another way. Like they'll find another way to fill that, and I don't think it'll necessarily even affect your relationship in a negative way. Like you expect that it might. You expect that like, oh, if I'm not this people pleaser, if I'm not this person that the people in my life rely on for these things, then our relationships will be worse, or no one will want to be around me. Like it's like I have this friend and he was a big people pleaser for a long time. Like he's very generous and giving, and people take advantage of that. Like within our friend group, like whenever they would go out to dinner or go out to lunch or anything, they just ask him to pay for them every single time. Like they'd be like, "Oh, I don't have any money, like can you please pay for me? Can you buy me this? Can you drive me here? Can you do this? Can you do this?" And like they were always taking advantage of him, and I would tell him, bro, like you can't let them just continually take advantage of you like this. It's not right. Like you're showing them your compassion, like you're doing these things for them, and they're not even grateful at a certain point. Whereas those same people, they would never do that to me because they recognize that I have firm boundaries, and I would say no, and I'd be like, "No, dude, I'm not buying you French fries. Like, go work a job. Like, I don't care how hungry you are. Like, why should I have to buy you French fries? You're not gonna starve." Whereas my friend, like, just with a little bit of prodding, like, he'd always buy them their food. He'd always do this or that for them. And it's gotten better over the years. Like, he's become more assertive. But it's like, yeah, like, all of our friends are good people. And it's not that they, like, were picking on him for these reasons. It was just that they knew. And it's like, it is manipulative, but it's very human. Like, it doesn't come from a malevolent place, like I said, but if they wanted food and they didn't have money on them, they would ask him and they'd manipulate him a little bit and be like, "Dude, I'm so hungry, please." And they knew that if they just pushed it hard enough, every single time they'd get what they want. And it's not like they're evil, it's not like there's anything wrong with them. That's just humans naturally sort of are that way. But once you learn to start saying no and be firm on that and not give in and not be like convincible, that's not even a word, but like if they weren't able to convince them, then they would just stop trying, and then, they were more likely to buy their own food. So in your own life, if you feel like you've become that target, like you're too much of a people pleaser, like just say no and just see what happens. Do it in the most respectful, polite way, but just don't give people an option. Set those boundaries and see what happens in your life. See you guys tomorrow.